Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I am finally getting around to the mid-year freakout tag. I'm very delayed, but I thought you guys might still want to know the answers to the questions. That being said, I've kind of gone a bit rogue on this. So for those that have been around a while, the mid-year freakout tag is a staple of Booktube that everyone does in the middle of the year to say how they're getting on with their reading, and it has some like prompt questions and all the rest of it. However, there are several iterations of this tag going around with different questions. So basically I've just cherry-picked the ones that I wanted to do, maybe added a couple of random ones in that were never there, and that's going to be what I do. So I hope that's okay. So before we start, at the date of when I wrote the notes for this, which was about 2 weeks ago, Charlie's just come to say hello. He's brought me number block 9. Hello. So when I sat down to write the notes for this about 2 weeks ago, I had read 85 books to date. One of the stats that I thought was interesting, I'm not going to go like heavy into stats, but one of the stats that I thought was interesting was average star rating this year thus far versus last year. So last year my average was 3.82 and this year it's 3.91. So that means I am enjoying my reading more this year statistically than last year. So that's good, and I do feel like I'm really enjoying my reading this year. I have read some great books. I've read books that I've really enjoyed from other authors. I enjoyed a lot of books from the Women's Prize. I found some books that I definitely wouldn't have found without it. I'm hoping that the same will be true of the Booker, but the proof will be in the pudding. And yeah, so I'm having a really good reading year as far as quality, and I have DNF'd quite a few because I've definitely been less patient with books this year. So if they're not grabbing me, I tend to just sack them off. So anyway, the questions. That was just a bit of a preamble about my reading year to date. The first question is best book of the year so far. And there are two. And I know you're not supposed to pick two. I know you're supposed to pick one. But they are so vastly different in genre, tone. Look, you want different things out of books at different times, right? So I've picked two. And the first of those is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. If you have not heard me waxing lyrical about this book, this one is about a young woman. It's told in first person. It's almost stream of consciousness, which put me off before I started it because I'm not a big fan of stream of consciousness. But it talks about her life sort of as a mother in those sort of first 2 years after having her first child, and basically what an absolute disaster zone she is. And I could hard relate. So I felt such an emotional connection to that book. It was unlike anything I'd ever read before. Apologies, you can now see number 8 coming into the frame. Here he is. Thank you, Charlie. And I recommend it with every core of my being. Is that the right? Every fibre of my being. Every fibre of my core. Anyway, I really think you should read it if you haven't already. I absolutely loved it. And I've never read a book quite like it. The other book that comes joint top for me is Shogun by James Clavell. Now, this is an adventure-packed historical fiction set in feudal Japan, following an English guy on a Dutch ship who comes over to Japan. They're really the first non-Portuguese to have made the trip, to have survived the trip, and it's about his encounter with the sort of the samurai lords there. And it talks about what is a samurai, and he gets sort of embroiled in the politics between like these feudal lords who are sort of coming to blows over who is going to be the shogun, the sort of main power in Japan. And it was epic. It was awesome. It is very, very long. Is it like 900 pages? I don't know. But it's worth every page, and it's so fast paced. For a book of that size to be that fast paced, it was epic, it was awesome, and I loved it so much. So yes, I do have reviews for both of those books, solo reviews, so if you wanted to hear me just gush really about them some more, you can find those reviews in the description box below. So the next question, which is a Gemma made up question, is most read genre this year. We have number 7. Thank you. And so I have a peruse on Storygraph. Also, if you're interested, my Storygraph is always linked below, so feel free to bob along and you'll see what I'm reading in sort of real time, because I can be a little delayed getting videos up. But yes, so most read genre was really no surprise to me. So number 1 was literary fiction. That is generally always my number 1. Number 2 was fantasy, and number 3 was historical. Those are my 3 favourite genres. So yeah, historical and fantasy quite often flip-flop through the year, depending on what I'm reading, obviously. That really came as no surprise. So if you're new and you are wondering what sort of content you're going to get here, it's going to be predominantly literary, fantasy and historical fiction. Next question. What is the worst book you have read this year? And hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, it's this turd. It's Ulysses by James Joyce. This was just utter garbage and gobbledygook. And though it was awful to read, it will actually always hold a very, very special place in my heart, because this was the last book that I buddy read with my amazing friend Alice. And we just enjoyed slagging it off every week. And yeah, I would not have got through this without her, and I miss her very much. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about that anymore, because I don't do crying on camera. Best sequel of the year, and that has to go to Saga Volume 9 by Brian K. Vaughan, illustrated by Fiona Staples. If anyone was interested, I've just been handed number 6. And Saga is a graphic novel series about 2 feuding species. It's sci-fi. And there's a sort of like star-crossed lovers situation. And from the one from one species, a guy from one species and a girl from another species get together, have a baby. That baby then narrates the story. And it's really about how they create their family in a very difficult political environment, and what it is to raise a child that is being hunted effectively by both sides of a war. And it's so good. It's so good. And in volume 9 something significant happens that I can't tell you because it would be a massive spoiler, but it blew my mind. I'm not going to say any more. But honestly, if you like graphic novels, if you like sci-fi, or if you're just looking for someone to start with graphic novels, Saga. Well, I say that, but really it's one of the best out there, so you're going to peak at the top. Next questions. New release that you haven't read yet but want to, and there are so many. There are so many. The ones that sort of stand out to me are Private Rights by Julia Armfield, which is her second novel. I absolutely adored Our Wives Under the Sea, which was her first novel that came out a couple of years ago. And so I'm really excited to see what happens next. To the point where I don't even know what this book is about. I just picked up a signed copy when I was on the bookshelf because it's Julia Armfield, and I want to go into it blind because she is awesome. So, well, I hope she's awesome. She was awesome last time, so I'm hoping she'll be awesome this time. I also really want to read Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright, which has got loads and loads of buzz, particularly in the Australian prize circle, which is a book by an Indigenous author, and she's telling an Indigenous story about a family in a small town, and there's some weird gas cloud, and I think donkeys may save the world. It sounds a bit bizarre, but so many people love this book, and obviously it's getting loads of literary attention. The problem I have with this is it's very, very long. I think it's about 700 pages. So yeah, finding time to slot it in is my problem there. And the third and final book that I'm going to mention, even though there are hundreds more, is Little Rot by Okwege Emeze, which is their attempt, I believe, at sort of a horror thriller-esque book. This is getting some mixed reviews, but I still really want to read it. So I'm hoping to get to that soon. Here's number 4. So a question that I've just randomly thrown in myself because I wanted it, is my favourite book introduced to me by a prize. So a book that I did not know anything about before, and I only read it because it was on a prize list. And that book has got to be In Defence of the Act by Effie Black. This one is following a young woman who has a past, a history with suicide, and she is investigating at university in a science capacity animals that commit suicide in nature, and when possibly they do that for the greater good. And then we sort of see her life as things sort of escalate. I really feel like it's one of these books that you need to go into blind, but I really adored it. It was super consumable. I just wanted to read it all the time. There's a hook through the book where you're just questioning things quite a lot. And yeah, I had never heard of this, and I'm so glad that the Women's Prize introduced it to me. Devastated that it didn't make the shortlist, but nonetheless I'm going to mention it again here so that it gets a little bit more love. So the next question is an anticipated book for the second half of the year, and I have two because of course I do. The first is the new Abidare book, And So I Roar, which is a sequel to The Girl with the Louding Voice, which I absolutely loved. The Girl with the Louding Voice is about a young girl who lives in, I think it's Nigeria, and she is sort of sold off by her father to marry this older man who already has two other wives, and what her life is like there and what she does to escape that situation, and her sort of drive for education. And it is incredible. Such an incredible book. The main character in that book just melts your heart, and you just want to give her a massive cuddle. And the next one, and So I Roar? And So I Roar is due out in August. It actually might be out before I manage to edit and get this video up, but nonetheless, I really want to read that one. And then the other one is The Fertile Earth by Rafika Rayo. And this one is one of the ones that I predicted for the Booker. Unfortunately, it didn't make it, but I'm still really excited to read this. This is published by One World, which is a publishing house that I'm paying more and more attention to because it just seems to be churning out excellent books. And this one is set in India, and it follows two characters in childhood predominantly. They're from different castes, and I think they go on like on a tiger hunting expedition or something dramatic happens. They're separated, and then it's about them coming back together again. So yeah, it just sounds really interesting. I really enjoy books that are set in India, and especially looking at the sort of divide between castes. So that one I'm really super anticipating also. Biggest disappointment of the year. So I have to say my answer to this is One Piece by Ichiro Oda, I think his name is, and this is a manga that everybody loves, about a young boy, Luffy, I think his name is, who wants to be a sailor. Everyone sort of laughs at him, and then he sort of tries to become a sailor. Like the not a sailor, like the most notorious pirate in the world or something. I don't know. It was a while ago that I read it now, but I just didn't get the hype. So I think there were a couple of problems for me. Firstly, the artwork was really busy and chaotic, and that does not work for me. And also, I just found the almost complete lack of female characters really irritating. So now we have number 20. So yeah, I'm probably going to get like cancelled or something from BookTube because I didn't like it, but I didn't like it. So that was my most disappointing read this year. And for my biggest surprise, I have two. I just can't keep to one. Like, I feel like no one's going to keep me accountable. And by the time this goes up, I can't change it. So we're just going to pick two. The first of which is Crooked Plough by Itamar Vieira Jr., translated by Johnny Lorenz. And this was nominated for the International Booker Prize. I think it was shortlisted. And I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting so much going into this. So I picked it up before it was even nominated. And it started a little weird. It follows two sisters, and at the beginning of the book, one of them accidentally cuts their tongue out. And then we sort of follow this book through, and it's really about life on a plantation in Brazil. And how even post official slavery is still there, and actually in some ways for some communities it's worse because they don't have anywhere to live, they're not fed, but they're also not really paid. It's really eye-opening in that capacity, but just looking at the community, there's some magical realism in there. I would say it's light sprinkling of magical realism, but in a way that I really enjoyed, and I just thought it was excellent. It really, really did surprise me, so that definitely gets a vote. Number 18. And the other one is Blessings by Chukwuebuka Ibe. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but again, I picked this one up on a whim, and it was amazing. It's a coming of age story about a young man in Nigeria coming to terms with his sexuality, and his father sort of realises that his son may be gay and sort of ships him off immediately to a boarding school. And so we follow our main character, Obifuna, in that boarding school and then in his life afterwards. And Obifuna was just such a delightful character. He was shades of grey for sure, but he was someone that you really rooted for, and even when he's making bad decisions, you're like, no man, you know better than that. But it also alternates between his perspective and his mother's perspective, and we sort of see what it is like for a mother in Nigeria to raise a gay son. And I just thought the juxtaposition between the two points of view was really fascinating and eye-opening, and it was so beautifully written, and I really think more people should pick it up because it was exquisite. I absolutely loved it, and so that was a big surprise. The next question is best character of the year, and I think that's going to have to go to Amos from the Expanse series. So this is not a new character to me for this year because I did start the Expanse series last year, but in the books that I've read this year, Nemesis Gate in particular, and one of the short stories, we learn a lot more about Amos's backstory, about his character, and we see things from his perspective a little bit as well. And I just love him. He's just great. He's this like big, bulky, like no emotions kind of guy that will just beat people up if they cross him. But he's just got this loyalty in him as well, and I just adore him as a character. So best character is going to go to Amos this year. Books that I want to read before the end of the year is the next question, and I think really the only one that I would mention, because I kind of just go with the flow, I will read some of the book along list and I will read random stuff as I feel like it, but the one that I have started that I really need to finish is A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. I started this way back in like February or March, around that time, with a group that was organised, and it was supposed to be like one part a week, and then I just completely fell off the wagon, and now I'm only 600 pages into a 1,500 page book, but I am planning to finish it. So that's my one book. If I don't finish anything else before the end of the year, I would like it to be that one. So fingers crossed. And then I've added one question in at the end, and that is booktubers that I've been loving this year. So the first one I want to talk to you about is Roro Reads. This guy, I think I discovered him towards the end of last year, second half of last year, and I was like, mate, where has this guy been hiding? Like, how did I not know about him? And he does a lot of single book reviews, but he's so funny in like, it can even be a book you're not interested in and you watch it and you're like, nailed it. But recently I was absolutely wetting myself when I was listening to his video in the car. He did a Booker Prize predictions video where he was spinning a wheel to pick his Booker Prize predictions. I'll link that video below. But just the way that he narrated it, because he did like a voiceover for it, the way that he did it just had me in stitches, and his comparison to Ben's method made me die. And he's just fantastic. So if you haven't heard of him, obviously he will be linked below. Yeah, he's definitely one that everyone should be watching. The next channel I'd like to talk to you about is Made You Book, which came onto my radar this year through all of her coverage of the Women's Prize. She did so many reviews for the Women's Prize. Gretchen is an American booktuber, and she just is so intelligent and thoughtful when she puts her reviews together. She covered both the non-fiction and the fiction, and she's covering the Booker, and she's just a delight to watch, and I just really love her channel, so I thought she deserved a shout out. And on a similar theme, looking at the Women's Prize, but one that I feel a bit of an idiot for, to be honest, is Caitlin at Bandy's Books. So I know Scott has mentioned Caitlin many a time before, and I'm always like, oh yeah, I need to check her channel out, and then I never got around to it. And then this year I actually did go and really check out Caitlin's channel, and she's fantastic. She's so much fun. She does all sorts of videos, so she's been doing quite a lot of lives lately, and she covers the Women's Prize, the Booker, and she reads very similarly to me, but she's just got this almost like homegrown vibe to her. I can't really explain it. It just feels like when she's talking, it just feels like you're talking to a mate. Like, it's just like, yeah, just really wholesome, I would say. She's a very wholesome person, and yeah, I'm so glad I finally got round to checking her out. I feel like a bit of an idiot for not doing it beforehand, because Scott had already said that she was brilliant, and he was right, because he usually is. So that is all the questions. I am absolutely roasting because it's so hot here in the UK, so I'm getting a bit dewy. So I'm going to call it a day there. I would love to know your answers to all or any or some or whatever questions you would like to answer in the comments below. And if you are interested in my reviews for Soldier Sailor or Shogun, I will leave them both here, and I will see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys!